The internet is full of platitudes and buzzwords. While I'm not the first one to point this out, there are always more to add to the list.
True sound of a revolution. Gotta go.
Globalism is a term that's very popular with InfoWars conspiracy types.
Ah! We're coming for you, globalist!
But it's been gaining traction in more mainstream circles lately, especially with anti-EU and right populist movements. Some of the rhetoric is just vague populism about those busybody bureaucrats at the UN and EU and fear of a monolithic world government, but underneath the platitudinal sloganeering there are some specific gripes. Anti-globalists oppose free trade agreements and are distrustful of multinational corporations who put their own interests above those of the people in any given country.
To them, freedom means never having to say you're sorry for building your agenda and business on the backs of everyone else.
In this sense, they're similar to the anti-globalization movement that emerged out of the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle in 1999. The major difference being that the anti-globalization movement is generally leftist, whereas people who use the term globalist generally come at it from the right, whether it be paleo-conservative or isolationist, nationalist, and sometimes traditionalist. So the economic populism gets coupled with xenophobic anti-immigrant sentiment.
They want to destroy national borders and allow terrorists to move in next door to you in the name of cultural enrichment and diversity.
While they are right to point out the links between the proliferation of global capital and the migrant crisis, it's not clear how exactly isolationist capitalism would solve the problem. This type of thinking assumes that imperialism started because a few companies just got greedy, and that we can stop them from being so greedy by passing a few laws that make it harder to outsource or something. This was a big part of Trump's economic policy, but it's hard to see how this can be anything other than a pipe dream.
If you have a job that pays first world wages and employs you in first world working conditions, you are now obsolete. Because a sweatshop worker in India, or a slave in an African diamond mine, or a victim of trafficking from China can do your job cheaper.
In reality, first world wages only exist because of third world wages. They want to have their cake and eat it too by keeping their slave-made consumer goods without having to compete with those slaves on the global labor market. If only there was some kind of political economic ideology where workers made roughly similar wages without having to compete with each other. This is why their plans for stopping immigration are temporary band-aid solutions, necessarily. The migrants are fleeing the misery and exploitation inflicted upon them by imperialist countries. And when they escape these conditions, some of them are inevitably going to want a bit of the first world luxury their home countries were destroyed in order to maintain. There is no wall high enough to stop the march of history. Equally naive and regressive is their wish to maintain their precious Western culture in a bubble, untainted by outside cultures in the age of global interconnectivity. In the real world, culture is always changing and being affected by outside elements. This goes for everyone apart from uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. Anyway, one of the most common targets of the globalist label is our next buzzword: George Soros. Now you may be thinking, how can he be a buzzword if he's a real person? Well, he is a real person, and he does finance political campaigns around the world. But beyond that, he bears little resemblance to the conspiracy theories attached to his name. Soros is a bit like a progressive Santa Claus. While there was a real St. Nicholas that went around giving things to children at some point, the figure has been so mythologized and given magical powers. Just like Santa Claus, the mythical George Soros has infinite funds and is omnipresent, always there to finance any group or movement that right-wing pundits don't like. It gets especially absurd when he's accused of funding far-left groups, and he gets grouped in with Marxists because during the Cold War, the real George Soros actually funded dissident groups within East Bloc countries with the goal of opening these countries up to liberal market reforms. In other words, Soros has actually done more to fight Marxism than any of these right-wing pundits ever have. But still, he's a billionaire philanthropist that funds progressive social causes, so that makes him an easy scapegoat. Anytime someone protests against Trump or anything else, it must be because they're paid to do it. There's also something else about him that makes him especially vulnerable to these populist conspiracy theories, but I'm not sure what. Lastly, there's the term mainstream media. This is one that people on the left use probably just as often, but it's just as meaningless no matter who uses it. All it says when you use it is, I'm not mainstream, but it doesn't say why. Is the problem that the media is ignoring the lizard people that control us from outer space? Are they mainstream because they don't believe the Earth is flat? Without any qualifiers, we don't know. It's just empty populism. For those on the left, you can use terms like bourgeois media or corporate media for a more general audience. Or if you're talking about imperialist warmongering in another country, you could use the term Western media to indicate geopolitical interests. As long as you don't use the term mainstream media, then you can avoid sounding like some kind of Alex Jones conspiracy monger. So that's all the buzzwords for today. Now you know.